From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. Hey, James, we're back for another great show, and we have a guest that's with us, and we're going to continue our conversation from the last episode.
Well, hi, Steve. I'm looking forward to this topic. As I even said earlier to you guys off mic or off air, this is one I can sit back and learn from the knowledge people.
I'm sure you'll have plenty to contribute. We're going to welcome back Mike Krejci from CTI. Mike, how are you? And it's good to have you back again.
Steve, James, it's good to be back. Thanks for having me back on. I guess I didn't screw up too much in the last time I was on, so good to be back.
Yeah, you're a veteran now. One of our regulars. So we talked a little bit about in the last episode how it's like to manage a team of programmers and like build community and try to wrangle, I guess, a bunch of people who tend to be very isolated. And I think another dynamic to think about, which not everybody experiences, and Mike, I know you, from our conversations, you can relate to this. I have some experience with it, and we're going to get James to give his perspective on it, as well as is having to learn so many diverse things that a programmer needs to learn to do their job. So there are some people that are very specific in what they do, and they kind of do the same type of system or the same type of programming from day to day, and they're very comfortable with that, and they get really good at it, and then there are some that like the craziness of having to juggle so many different things, whether it's languages or applications and whatever that might be. I'm curious, Mike, from your perspective. I know that you're probably in a similar situation that I've been faced with, is that you have to do what a client wants. How do you get good at doing a lot of different things when it comes to be a programmer? Because although there's commonalities between what you do, there's a lot of differences and a lot of intricacies.
I think a lot of it comes down to learning and growing. We ultimately serve the customer at CTI. So with as many offices we have, as many customers as we have, we don't have the luxury of going, we're only going to sell you solution A or processor B or audio device Z. It's the customer has a need, and we are going to fit that need, no matter what the solution is or what the partner is. And so that could mean one day I'm writing in one language, the next day I'm another. Could be a different DSP from day to day, from hour to hour, and it's being able to quickly adapt to what I'm doing, what I'm changing, what the industry does, on what's new coming out. And then in the days now, we're going into the traditional languages of Python and C# and Java and HTML. It's now crack opening the CS books from college and going, okay, how did I do that in HTML again? And, building on a new set of skills from even the AV ones I had before.
James, that's probably a good jumping off point, because I think Mike is right on target. He probably covered about 4 of our episodes right there, just in that answer. You and I have talked about like what do programmers need to be learning, and what are the things that are coming in the future, and how do we involve mainstream programming languages. From your perspective, James, is there time do we have to allot time to be able to kind of tinker and mess around, or is that stuff that programmers should just be doing naturally on their own?
Yes and yes. We need to allow time for development, because that's where you learn. I like the saying that I don't fail, I either succeed or I learn. So if you're not making mistakes, you are not innovating, and you're not learning, and you're not getting better. And sometimes you have to do that on the clock, not with your clients, but in a test environment, as best as you can. Now, my environment's different than Mike's over there, and or you see, but I would never suggest running beta stuff on your end users. But you got to develop, you got to learn, you got to try new things, and sometimes you got to get egg on your face and learn from that. So on the clock, after hours, whenever, you got to learn, you got to develop, you got to grow.
I think it kind of speaks to, what we said a little bit in our last episode, is that the fact that programmers have to stretch themselves a little bit and have to get out of their comfort zone is pretty critical. Mike, one of the things that I've changed and that I've noticed is that the makeup of a programmer, in my opinion, for the future is a little bit different than maybe what we had in the past, where we definitely were looking at kind of AV guys that came in and had the potential to grow into being a programmer. And is it time to start looking at software people that can just learn AV and come at it from a different angle? Have you had an experience with one or the other?
I think the traditional group of our programmers, have been that group that came from AV. They were the installers. They grew as an installer. Then at some point they were the ones who had to crack open the laptop on the job site. The programmer didn't show up that day. They were out of town. They had to crack open the laptop and start tinkering with things. That's where I got into my programming, role at CTI, was, being that installer, then getting into programming. But I think as we move forward, it's more of that software development mindset. The guys who are traditionally good at the line code, and then we teach them AV. We teach them then what EDIT is, what signal flow is, what AEC is, after they've already learned the programming stuff. Let them be good at programming and developing, and then let's get them into AV.
I think that's very interesting, because I think it could be argued both ways. The one of the challenges that I see is that somebody coming from an outside world may get frustrated with the AV constraints of what we can do, and that's actually what makes what we do so interesting, is that you almost have to do a lot with not the most modern tools sometimes, or not even all of the clubs in your golf bag, let's say, and that's what makes programmers so resourceful in AV, I think. James, I'll kind of have you jump in on this. When you're looking at somebody in Mike's position and is trying to kind of tackle a bunch of different different platforms, like what are some of the things that might benefit you to learn from that type of an experience? Or is there value in being able to have somebody like that to call when you're considering doing something, or you're having a moment where you might be making a change in your hardware investment, or considering a different platform?
Yes, I agree that having someone who's versed in different areas is very key. I'm very limited in my AV programming knowledge. I know one platform. I do have the confidence in myself that if we were to move to another manufacturer, I can learn it. Especially now that we are having more Python and the CSS and HTML5. Those are things we can learn and use. But the way I look at it is, if you are used to one way and one way only, and you're not willing to change, you're doing a disservice to your customer and your end user and to yourself. Because as I tell people, just because you've been doing it one way for 20 years does not mean it's the right way of doing it. So there might be a better way. There might be a more economic way of doing things. There might be a more ease way to do things, or a streamline. And you don't know what you don't know. And reaching out to someone who can give you a broader picture can be beneficial. I mean, yes, having someone who's an expert in, one language is helpful, because they can get really nitty ditty in the weeds there and help you out. But then if you have to branch out, are they even valuable to you anymore?
Mike, I'm curious, with regard to your team, how many of them, or is there a requirement that they know multiple languages in order to be like to be able to grow and excel, or can they, to James' point, can they just be really good at one?
There's no rule. We have guys that, some people they're great at all, right? They can switch from language to language, manufacturer to manufacturer. There's some that, this is my language, this is what I do, and I've been doing it, and I'm going to be great at it. There's some guys that are, universal, and you go, this is something weird and quirky, do you want to try it? Sure. So it's a mixed bag. And it's one of the nice things about having, a deep bench, is we don't need everyone to be great at 25 manufacturers. As long as there's they have value, and they're showing their value, then be great at that, and no problem to you.
I think that's a good way to look at it, is your bench. Like, you putting into a term that some people know, sport event like baseball, like your single programming language person is like your closer, your pitcher, who you bring in when, okay, we need to get this done. But then your starter is more of your generalist, and you build off of that. And or your football, where you have your guys who can play offense and defense, but then you have your specialty, your punter, your kickers, to get down where you really need to. I think that's a good way of looking at it. You use all your tools available.
It's interesting, because I think that, having the depth or the size definitely helps with that, versus in a smaller team. I think it's harder to have people that are one of each, whereas you almost are forced, if you're going to support multiple platforms, for everybody to be able to be multilingual or be comfortable, because you don't have the same type of flexibility to move people around as much. Mike, if you were to give somebody some advice as to what could help them grow and help them be more effective, what are some of the technologies you would say to focus on, and where do you see things going in the AV industry?
So I think the big thing is fundamentals. A number is a number in any language. A string is a string in any languages. So, work on the fundamentals in one language, whatever one that is, right? Whether it's one of the manufacturer ones, whether it's a traditional language, work on the fundamentals of it and get that down pat. And once you get it down pat in one, then switching to the next one is easy, right? Because you're still dealing with numbers, you're still dealing with strings. How you add the two strings might be a little bit different from this language to that language, but you already know how to do it and how to manipulate it. So once you get the fundamentals, then work on expanding your knowledge, and then the rest just fall into place after that, I think.
That's gold.
Yeah.
I really I can't think that's advice that everybody should take to the bank.
Agree. That was definitely gold there.
I as we wrap up, James, what are some of your thoughts in terms of the how programmers can become more diverse and be and get be able to expand their capabilities.
As I said on the what 2 episodes ago, the Infocom one is get out of your shell. The more you're in your shell, the more limit you are. Connect with people like Steve and Mike. Get out there on those groups, the Discord and Facebook groups, and even as Mike said, the Yahoo groups out there. That's dating yourself there, I think, Mike. But get
Hey,
out
I
there.
remember it too, so
Yeah.
I'll be with them in the old guy group.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was just funny for me, but yeah, it's get out there, get out of your shell, because again, as I said, you don't know what you don't know.
Again, more gold to share. As we wrap up, James, why don't you let people know how to reach you and learn more about what you're doing, and then we'll get some parting words from Mike, and appreciate his time on this episode again.
Yeah, again, Mike, thank you for joining us. Always great hearing from our fans as well as other knowledgeable people in the field. You guys can connect with me at Twitter, AV_James King, LinkedIn, James King. I do write for the Higher Ed Digital Magazine, IT and AV column that comes out monthly, and this monthly podcast.
Thanks.
Or weekly. Sorry.
But it feels like monthly, but it's but we're at it for over 30 weeks now. So Mike, thanks so much again. And we're definitely going to have you back. And it's just so great that we got a chance for us to connect in person. And it just speaks to the value of this and being able to learn together is just so important. If people wanted to ask you some questions and get to know you better and learn what you're up to, how can they do that? And also how can they reach CTI?
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Steve and James, for having me again. It's a real pleasure joining this and you guys listen to me talk. It feels good. If you want to go to our website, cti.com, you can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn at the Mike Krejci. That's where I can be found. More time on Twitter probably than anything else.
I recommend you guys connect with him and gals and learn more about what he's doing. And hey, ask him some more questions and also reach out just to continue this conversation, because that's what this is all about. It's the community and being able to relate to one another. And it feels like we know each other for years just in talking in the last few weeks. So for me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on most social platforms. Twitter and LinkedIn are probably where I spend the most time. I do some writing for my company blog at controlconcepts.net and for AV Network and AV Technology Magazine. You could check that out as well. But what's important to us is that you let us know about your thoughts on this show and what we could do more of, and send us your questions and more topics. And if you want to be a guest, reach out, because it's that easy. You could find our show, Ask the Programmer, on YouTube or on Google and Apple podcasts. And we'd really like to hear from you. Leave a rating or review, and it would be very much appreciated. With that, this has been Ask the Programmer.